All right, let's dive into this story of Harut and Marut.
Yeah.
When you sent in this lecture by this Islamic scholar about this story from Surah Al-Baqarah, I knew we had to explore it.
Yeah.
It's one of those Quranic narratives that really makes you think.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story that has captivated and puzzled scholars for centuries. And, it speaks to something very fundamental about the human condition, I think.
Yeah.
Our yearning for knowledge, our susceptibility to temptation.
Right.
That constant struggle between faith and doubt.
Okay, so let's unpack this. The lecture starts by taking us way back to the time before Prophet Suleiman, or Solomon, as some of you might know him.
Yes.
What was going on in the world back then? What's the context for this whole story?
Well, imagine a world where magic wasn't just the stuff of legends and fairy tales, but a potent force woven into the fabric of society. Before Prophet Suleiman, the lecture explains that jinn, spiritual beings with free will, often associated with fire, would eavesdrop on the angels in heaven. They were trying to steal, essentially, knowledge of God's decrees, those divine pronouncements about the future.
So they were like celestial spies, these jinn.
Precisely.
Yeah.
They'd snatch bits of information about what was to come and then share it with human sorcerers.
Wow.
These sorcerers would then use this knowledge to manipulate and control people.
Oh, wow.
Leading them to believe that they could predict or even alter their destinies.
That makes you wonder about the psychology of it all, right? Like, what would drive someone to seek out this kind of magic in the first place? Is it a thirst for power, a fear of the unknown, maybe just a desperate attempt to control their own lives?
It's a question worth pondering, isn't it? The lecture touches on the concept of fitna, which means trial or temptation.
Yeah.
Perhaps this widespread practice of magic was a test, a way for people to confront their own vulnerabilities and make choices about where they place their trust and allegiance.
So enter Prophet Suleiman, who, according to the Quran, was not only a king, but also a prophet gifted with extraordinary abilities.
Suleiman's reign was a pivotal moment in this narrative. The lecture emphasizes that he was given dominion over not just humans, but also jinn and even animals. In an effort to curb the spread of magic, he gathered all the books containing these harmful practices.
Wow.
And buried them under his throne, decreeing that anyone caught practicing or promoting magic would face severe consequences.
A pretty decisive action. Did that actually work? Did burying the books really eliminate the threat of magic?
It certainly had an impact. For a time, the spread of magic was contained. But as the lecture points out, human memory can be fickle.
Right.
And temptations have a way of resurfacing, especially when there's a power vacuum.
So after Suleiman's era, things took a rather intriguing turn with the story of Harut and Marut.
Exactly.
Yeah.
After Suleiman passed away, a new generation arose, one that had either forgotten or chosen to ignore his warnings about the dangers of magic. It was during this time that a cunning devil, disguised as a helpful human, tricked people into digging up those buried books.
Oh, no, leading them to believe
that they contained unimaginable treasures, of course. But instead of riches, they unearthed something far more dangerous. The means to manipulate and control, to tap into forces beyond the realm of the divine. And with that, magic came roaring back, perhaps even stronger than before.
So this is where Harut and Marut enter the picture, but there's a lot of debate about who they actually were, right?
Absolutely. The lecture highlights the various interpretations offered by scholars. Some believe they were angels sent by God as a test for humanity.
Okay.
While others say they were jinn or even humans who had learned magic from devils. Interestingly, the lecture also debunks a commonly circulated story about them being tempted by a woman.
Oh, really?
Emphasizing that this narrative isn't supported by authentic Islamic sources.
It's fascinating how these stories get passed down and sometimes take on a life of their own. So if we stick to what the Quran actually says, what was the role of Harut and Marut in all of this? Were they spreading magic or trying to stop it?
That's the heart of the matter, isn't it? What's clear from Surah Al-Baqarah is that they served as a fitna, a trial or a test. And regardless of their true nature, the way they presented magic to people is incredibly revealing.
In what way?
Well, before teaching anyone magic, they issued a stark warning, stating that it was kufr, disbelief, because it involved seeking help from beings other than God.
Because true reliance should be on God alone, not on these other forces or entities.
Precisely. Magic, according to the Islamic understanding presented in the lecture, relies on forces outside of God's will. It's about trying to manipulate the natural order, to bend reality to one's own desires, often with unintended and harmful consequences.
So even though they warned people, some still chose to learn magic. What was so alluring about it?
Perhaps it was the promise of power, the ability to influence others to control their destinies, or maybe it was a desperation for solutions, a way to solve problems or escape difficult situations. But the lecture makes it clear that this power came at a steep price.
And that price was...
Well, the Quran specifically mentions the destructive effects of magic, particularly its ability to cause separation and discord between people, especially spouses. The lecture even gives some chilling examples of how magic could be used to make a spouse appear repulsive or even prevent intimacy.
It's unsettling to think about how these practices could be used to manipulate and control, to sow seeds of distrust and ultimately destroy relationships. This isn't just about parlor tricks. It's about something far more insidious.
Yes, and it raises some important questions about the motives of those who wield this kind of power. What are they hoping to achieve? And what are the unintended consequences of their actions?
It makes you wonder if those who sought out magic truly understood the forces they were tampering with, the spiritual and psychological ramifications of their choices. And it makes you appreciate the importance of seeking knowledge and guidance from trustworthy sources.
That's a crucial point. And it's something we'll explore further as we delve deeper into the story of Harut and Marut and its implications for our lives today.
I'm ready to keep diving in. What else does this lecture reveal about the true nature of magic and its impact on individuals and society? As we're talking about all this, I can't help but think about how the spread of magic back then is kind of like the spread of misinformation we see today.
That's a very interesting parallel.
Yeah.
We may not have jinn whispering secrets from heaven anymore,
Right.
but we do have algorithms feeding us all sorts of questionable content. It's almost like a digital form of magic.
Yeah.
Where information is manipulated and distorted to influence our perceptions and beliefs.
It's like those people who were tricked into digging up Suleiman's books thinking they were going to find treasure.
Right.
But nowadays, we fall for clickbait headlines or, those sensationalized stories that prey on our fears and desires.
Yeah.
It's so easy to get swept up in the current of information overload.
Right.
Without stopping to question the source or the agenda behind it.
Absolutely. And just like the people in that era had to discern between truth and falsehood.
Right.
Between genuine guidance and, manipulative sorcery.
Yeah.
We too need to equip ourselves with the tools of critical thinking. We need to question the sources of information we encounter, seek out diverse perspectives, and ground ourselves in knowledge that's rooted in evidence and reason.
It's like we need a modern-day version of Suleiman's wisdom to help us navigate this overwhelming sea of information. He recognized the danger of unchecked knowledge,
Right.
the way it could be used to exploit and manipulate.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the story of Harut and Marut. You mentioned that the Quran highlights a specific and disturbing purpose behind magic.
Yes. This is where the lecture gets really thought-provoking. It's not just about causing harm or misfortune.
Right.
It's about separating people from God.
And the scholar actually shares an anecdote about a pious woman who was targeted with magic,
Oh, wow.
but remained unharmed because she consistently recited Surah Al-Baqarah.
That's incredible.
It's a reminder that sometimes the best defense against negativity is strengthening our own spiritual connection.
That story beautifully illustrates the protective power of faith and the importance of grounding ourselves in the divine word. But to understand why magic is seen as a tool of separation,
Right.
we need to delve deeper into its nature. The lecture argues that magic, at its core, is a form of idolatry.
Okay.
It relies on placing trust and seeking power from sources other than God.
So it's not just about casting spells or summoning spirits. It's about that underlying shift in allegiance.
Exactly.
That turning away from the divine and towards something else.
Exactly. It could manifest in clinging to superstitions, putting blind faith in material possessions or worldly authorities, or even becoming overly reliant on our own intellect without acknowledging the limits of human understanding.
It's like we're constantly being tempted to put our trust in things that promise us control or security, but ultimately leave us vulnerable and disconnected from the source of true power.
Yes, and this is where the story of Harut and Marut serves as such a potent reminder.
Right.
It's a cautionary tale against misplaced trust, the allure of shortcuts, and the dangers of seeking power outside of the divine will.
And even with the warning they issued, some people still chose magic. What does that say about human nature?
It speaks to the complexity of our choices, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We're all susceptible to temptation, to the desire for quick fixes or easy solutions.
Right.
But true fulfillment comes from aligning ourselves with the divine will, from seeking knowledge and wisdom that's rooted in truth, and guided by ethical principles.
It's a continuous journey of discerning between what serves us and what ultimately leads us astray. And it seems like reciting Surah Al-Baqarah can be a source of strength and protection on that journey.
Absolutely. The lecture emphasizes that Surah Al-Baqarah, being the longest chapter in the Quran, covers a wide range of topics essential for leading a righteous life. It offers guidance on matters of faith, law, history, and the stories of prophets who face similar tests and trials.
So reading it regularly is not just a ritualistic act. It's about immersing ourselves in its wisdom, letting its message permeate our hearts and guide our choices.
Precisely. It's about internalizing the lessons and applying them to our lives. It's about cultivating a mindful connection with the Quran, allowing its words to nourish our souls and strengthen our resolve to stay on the path of righteousness.
I love how you framed it as nourishment for the soul. It's not just about acquiring knowledge, but about integrating it into our very being.
It reminds me of that beautiful verse. And we send down of the Quran that which is healing and mercy for the believers.
Right.
The Quran speaks to our deepest fears and anxieties, offering solace, strength, and direction in a world that can often feel chaotic and confusing.
So it's not just about warding off negativity. It's about actively cultivating positivity, nurturing our spiritual well-being, and strengthening our connection with the divine.
Beautifully said. It's about recognizing that true power lies not in manipulating external forces, but in transforming our inner world.
Right.
And that transformation is fueled by faith, knowledge, and a sincere desire to live in accordance with God's will.
It's fascinating how the story of Harut and Marut, while highlighting the dangers of magic, ultimately points us towards this deeper understanding of where true strength and security lie.
Yes, and it underscores the importance of making conscious choices about where we place our trust, what we allow to influence our minds and hearts, and how we navigate the complexities of life in a way that aligns with our values and principles.
It's a powerful message that resonates even today, reminding us that the battle between temptation and faith is an ongoing one, a struggle that we all face in different forms throughout our lives. This whole deep dive into the story of Harut and Marut has really uncovered so many layers of meaning. It's not just some historical anecdote. It's a reflection of the challenges that we face even today in a world where misinformation and, this desire for quick fixes can easily lead us astray.
It makes you wonder about the motives of those who seek out magic, both in those times and in our own.
Right.
What are they hoping to gain? And what are the potential consequences of their choices?
The lecture suggests that often it stems from this desire for control, control over circumstances, relationships, even the future. But isn't it ironic that resorting to magic actually surrenders control to external forces? You're essentially placing your trust in jinn or spirits with their own agendas, hoping they'll act in your favor.
Yeah, it's like building a house on a foundation of sand. It might seem stable for a while, but it's ultimately vulnerable to collapse. True strength and resilience come from surrendering to God's will, trusting in His plan, and seeking His guidance in all matters.
So instead of trying to manipulate the world around us through magic, we should focus on purifying our hearts, aligning our intentions with what's pleasing to God. It's about recognizing that true power lies not in bending the rules of the universe, but in aligning ourselves with the divine will.
Beautifully put. The story of Harut and Marut reminds us that the most powerful force in the universe is not magic or sorcery, but the divine power of God. And that power is accessible to all of us through prayer, supplication, and striving to live a life of righteousness.
It's like that verse that says, and whoever relies upon Allah, then He is sufficient for him. Trusting in God doesn't mean passively waiting for things to happen. It means actively seeking His guidance. Making choices that are in line with His teachings and striving to be the best versions of ourselves.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we have free will and the ability to choose our path. Just like those who chose to learn magic despite the warnings. We too are constantly faced with decisions that will shape our lives and our connection with the divine.
And knowing that even when we face challenges or make mistakes, God is always with us, guiding and supporting us along the way. The story of Harut and Marut, while highlighting the dangers of magic and disbelief, ultimately points us toward the source of true power and protection, our connection with God.
It's a story that resonates through the ages, reminding us that the battle between temptation and faith is an ongoing one. It's a struggle that we all face in different forms throughout our lives. But ultimately, the victory lies with those who choose to put their trust in God and strive to live a life that is pleasing to Him.
This deep dive into Surah Al-Baqarah has been incredibly enlightening. We hope you've enjoyed exploring this fascinating story with us and that it's given you some food for thought as you navigate your own journey. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep questioning, and keep striving to live a life filled with purpose and meaning.